With Labour announcing that they are considering a second referendum, are they ignoring the will of the people?
Thank you. The job of the opposition is to oppose, and quite understandably, they want to make the life of the government difficult. That's what oppositions do, and the lady at the Labour Party conference quite rightly pointed out to us that the Labour Party would love another election. Opposition parties always want another general election because they hope that they might get into government, and that's their aim. But on the second referendum question, how many votes have we got to have on this? In 2015, we had a general election that decided that we would have the referendum. We then had the referendum, and then we had a general election where both major parties said they would implement the result of the referendum. It seems to me that there is a smallish group of people who are so determined not to allow us to leave the European Union that they want us to make us go on voting until we give the result that they want. And I don't think the British people will fall for that, and I don't think we should be hoodwinked by it. I think we should say this decision has been taken, and most of what Ian said I agreed with, that democracy requires that you implement that result before you start deciding what you're going to do on another referendum. That decision has been taken, and frankly, I think we need to crack on and leave as soon as possible.
It seems to me that the only Brexit deal we can get is the one that Europe allows us to have. And
yes.
And that seems to involve free movement of people, which seems to be one of their hard lines. So how is, whether it's Labour, Conservative or anyone else, ever going to deliver Brexit or staying within the European hard lines?
Well, they want...
All right, Jacob, and could you answer one other thing?
Yes,
given that there are different ways of leaving the EU, what is wrong with people voting on which way they wish to leave the EU?
Well, I'll ask the lady's point first, because it's absolutely crucial. We're offering them £40 billion, and for £40 billion we should be able to buy quite a lot, and that includes getting out of free movement of people, and if we don't, we give them nothing, and we have no obligation to, and the House of Lords did a very important report last year that showed that if we leave without coming to an agreement, we don't owe them a penny. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your money that we would save. It's taxpayers' money. And I think that's a very good and strong negotiating position, and we should not simply accept the departure the EU is offering. That would be political madness. But to come to Mr. Dimbleby's point, the government has had a clear steer as to what it wants to do, and we know that we're leaving. And leaving means that the United Kingdom Parliament sets our laws. It doesn't mean checkers, where they continue to be set by the European Union. It doesn't mean being in the EEA, where we're still bound by freedom of movement. It means leaving the European Union, and then all these matters become issues to be discussed at general elections. And Ian and I at these general elections will take very different views. And I will stand for elections saying that I believe we should be a low-tax enterprise economy. And Ian will stand saying we should have nationalisation and higher taxes. And you, the British people, will then decide what you want. That's what Brexit means.
Given the Chequers deal was not received well, is it time for a Brexit supporter to lead the negotiations?
Is it time for a Brexit supporter to lead the negotiations? I don't know if this was aimed at you, Jacob, but you better answer it first. Because you've called Chequers a dying duck.
A dying duck in a thunderstorm, yes.
Whatever that is. And you've said that the Prime Minister's wisdom and insight, she'll think carefully about adopting it. But she clearly isn't thinking, because she's still adopting Chequers and says it's the only way.
I suppose the politician's answer, in terms of a Brexit supporter leading the negotiations, is that the Prime Minister is, of course, now a Brexit supporter, and that Brexit means Brexit. Only one person laughed. I thought they did.
Good joke.
Thank you. You're the comedian.
Say that.
But look, to be frank, I agree with a lot of Rod's analysis of this. I think the negotiations have been badly conducted. I think we have let the European Union make the running in the negotiations. We agreed to their establishment of the terms of the negotiations and the timetable of the negotiations. I think this has not been impressive. And I think Chequers is not leaving the European Union. It is remaining bound by an EU rulebook, which is interpreted by the European Court of Justice, and it becomes the customs collection system for the European Union, and the European Union's rejected it anyway. So Chequers may not even be a dying duck. It may be slightly more Count Dracula, that it seems to get up at night and walk abroad, but it doesn't really have much life in the sunlight.
Duckula.
Or Count Duckula.
But isn't it time? Isn't it time to?
So come on, throw me a bone.
Isn't it time to get rid of the person who is still committed to Chequers in that case? If you believe what you're saying.
Of course I believe what I'm saying. I wouldn't... I wouldn't come in front of this distinguished audience and say things I didn't believe. Indeed, I think saying what you don't believe is one of the great errors that some politicians make. It's known as spin, and it's a bad way to approach politics.
So does Theresa May believe in Chequers?
The Prime Minister does believe in Chequers, and I want her to change her policy, and that is what I'm campaigning for. And I think inevitably the policy will have to change because it has no supporters. I don't know if even the Downing Street cat is any longer supporting the policy. If the EU won't accept it, and it can't get through the House of Commons, which the Labour Party is committed to voting against it, and a large number of Eurosceptic Conservatives are committed to voting against it. The DUP doesn't seem to be in favour of it. How does it get through the Commons?
Right.
Even if...
Very briefly, any chance of a general election before 2022, I think it is?
I think it's extremely unlikely. That I think people feel there have been enough elections. Brenda for Bristol put it very well just before the general election, and I think we're all with Brenda nowadays.
All right. And the woman up there,
Jay, can I just say, the one thing is, I do think that you've been really funny about how you've managed how you think the economic prospects of Brexit is going to be, because you have quite sensibly moved quite a lot of your funds to Dublin, which is not exactly a massive sign of, like, confidence.
That is simply untrue. My fund management company has funds in Australia, Singapore, the UK, Canada, the United States, and so on. We have one small fund in Dublin. 95% of our business is not in the EU, excluding the United Kingdom. This is something that I'm afraid to say is put around by people on the left who don't like Brexit. Fund management companies have funds in jurisdictions across the world.
This is like saying, I'm not getting on this lifeboat because of that big, massive iceberg that we're going towards. Let's get real.
You didn't control this fund, or do you control it?
I don't manage the fund either, but my business has funds globally. Right. We are a global investment management company. That's what we do.
Tells you a lot. Chase the money.
Right.
Chase the money.
It tells you nothing.
Very briefly from you, please.
Is Jeremy Corbyn right when he said that the greed is good culture must end?
Jacob.
Well, greed is obviously not good, but that doesn't mean the profit motive isn't good. And you have to divide the two, and you have to be realistic about this. Of course, you can make everybody equal if you make nobody have any money at all. You can level everything down and you can impoverish the whole nation, which is what Jeremy Corbyn's economic policy would do. If you look just at corporation tax has been cut from 28p in the pound to 19p in the pound, and the revenue from corporation tax has gone up by over 50%. Putting it back up, which the Labour Party, as I understand it, wishes to do, will simply mean that you get less revenue because behaviour will change. And what you always want to do is grow the economy so that everybody gets better off. And take this issue of employee share ownership. I'm very much in favour of this. I think it's a really positive thing for employees to own shares in the company in which they work. But actually what Jeremy Corbyn has proposed is an enormous tax grab. That if you take the example of Shell and the dividends Shell pays, the 6,500 employees could get a maximum of £500 each in dividends. HM Treasury could get over £1 billion. So who wins on that?
Is it bad for the Treasury to get more funds in that way?
If you're taking it out of productive companies that would otherwise be able to use this money to pay their employees more or to invest on improving the service that they provide, yes, it is. Because by and large, ladies and gentlemen, you spend your money better than the government spends it for you. And there is an economic choice. Do you allow the decisions to be made by the government? Do you nationalise the railways again? Total nationalisation bill that's being proposed is £176 billion. Do you want to do that, Or do you actually think that bringing private capital in is going to produce a better, more fundamentally sound economy that can grow? Because what we want is for everybody to be better off and the standard of living for everybody to rise, rather than simply cutting people down to the lowest common denominator.
But wages haven't risen. That's
a very important point.
All right, hold on a second. I'll come back to you.
The issue on wages and living standards is absolutely crucial. The government has done some things like raising the tax threshold, which is a right step, but not alone enough. Actually, I think the real shake-up is Brexit, because one of the things that has held wages down for the least well-off is the free movement of people, because by and large, there is evidence for that, actually. There is evidence for it at the lower level, that wages are kept down by the free movement of people, and restricting that.
It is exactly what
No, it didn't. It said it was marginal. It said it was marginal.
If you were on that, sorry, you were expressing care for the lowest paid a few minutes ago. Now their marginal losses don't matter to you.
Oh, and you think Brexit's going to help them?
Yes.
You think the economy going off the cliff edge? Do you think unemployment going up in this country? Well, I've spent today in Leeds with people who are on benefits and the most marginalised, and they are absolutely terrified of crashing out the Brexit. So none of this nonsense about how, it's not going to hurt the poorest. That is absolutely not true.
All right, Jacob.
And by the way, food banks in this constituency has gone up from 0 to 7.
What he said was correct.
And
it was in the report.
OK, you two just let Jacob have a word, because he was attacked from up there, he was attacked from here. He has a chance to reply.
I'm used to that. I'm a Conservative politician. Escape from question time in one piece is always a privilege. But I think it's really important that Brexit delivers for people who are the least well off. It's why I'm so enthusiastic about it. It's about lifting tariffs, which hit mostly
how is costing their jobs going to
let him
allowed to finish. Mr. Dimbleby will ensure everybody gets in. Food, clothing and footwear are the most heavily tariffed items that come in. And that has a greater effect on the incomes of the least well-off in our society. Cutting those costs will be good for the least well-off. Restricting the free movement of labour, ensuring that wages for people in care homes do go up, not by government fiat, but because...
So are you going to pay a rise when we leave the EU, are we?
I think...
So are you going to guarantee that care home workers will get a significant pay rise?
Restricting free movement of labour is highly likely to increase the wages of those on the minimum wage, because
there's no migrants working in care homes in this region.
There's a shortage.
No, but in the country at large, there are many migrants working in care homes.
So there's already a shortage. So how come wages haven't gone up for care home workers?
Wages can only go up in care homes funded by the government if the government pays for the care homes, which means it has to put up taxes.
Wages can go up not if you put up taxes, but if the economy grows, and you get the economy to grow by making...
Just try to manage one at a time. Because if you speak 3 at a time, 2 at a time, nobody at home can hear what you're saying. Finish your sentence, or have you?
The economy grows when you make the right economic choices, and then you get the tax revenues that allow you to pay for what you want to pay for. To go back to the election, there is no magic money tree.
Should allegations of alleged assault, sexual assault and rape be automatically believed until the alleged perpetrator's guilt is established?
Is this in the light of today's evidence in Washington? Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh's in line to be on the Supreme Court. Is that what you were thinking of?
No.
No, OK. Jacob, we have only 30 seconds or a minute or so left.
It is not the job of the police to believe or disbelieve, but to investigate, but that they absolutely should take seriously, because there has been, historically, an unwillingness to believe people who were genuinely victims. And so it's very important that the police should investigate independently and open-mindedly, but that they are only allegations until they are shown to be true, and the presumption of innocence is something on which all our freedoms depend. It could be any one of us who is falsely accused. Any one of you sitting in this audience could find somebody who dislikes you, make it as an allegation, and like the gentleman, I know the gentleman you're referring to, had his life very seriously harmed by unfair, dishonest, malevolent allegations that the police said were true before they'd looked into them. That is quite wrong, and it doesn't advance the cause of real victims because it makes it less likely that the real victim will be believed. So pedantic legal niceties are actually of fundamental importance to protecting all our liberties.